Hey guys, Root Beer here. Let's actually talk now about what to do when you're writing the contest, you're in the contest, just in broad strokes. We'll talk about different types of problems, different types of giving your answers in another video. But in broad strokes, so you've been studying for a year for your contest, or a couple months at least. You have everything organized, you got your ride, and you packed your lunch, you've driven to the contest, you let in the supplies that you brought, maybe the scrap paper's confiscated, whatever, but now you actually have to write the contest, okay? And we're going to be referring back to your preparation and adding some things that maybe I didn't add in my long-term prep video. But what you should do is you should be aware of the competition that you're writing. By that I mean, well, if you are going to be writing the Euclid, you should know that ahead of time, and that should be part of your long-term planning. But you should also know the contest you're writing in terms of its marking scheme. For example, the multiple choice contests from Waterloo are all the same. It's 5 marks for the first 10, 6 marks for the next one, the next 10, and 8 marks for the last 5 questions, the hard questions. So you should know sort of the layout of where the hard questions are, the marking schemes, again referencing the Waterloo competitions, the Friar Galois Hypatia. Each question is worth 10 marks for a total of 40. Okay, so the marks for those contests are particularly evenly distributed, and not, say, like the Pascal distributed based on difficulty. Okay, so knowing how the contest is laid out, you should have a general plan of attack. Okay, now this can be just as basic as I'm going to go from the start to the finish. You know, first question, second question, third question, fourth question. But you know, if you notice that certain questions take more time, or that you need to see certain questions in advance to get a better handle on them, then try and incorporate that into your plan. When I took contest, let's take the Euclid for example. So 10 questions, they get progressively harder. Unless it's your grade 12 year, you probably aren't attempting 9 and 10. So with that in mind, say you're a grade 9 person and you're attempting Euclid, don't even bother. I mean, if you want to, you can, but don't really bother with 7, 8, 9, 10. If you're in grade 9, some of those questions you haven't even learned the material for. Okay? But let's say it's your grade 12 year, you're actually going, you're trying to write a scholarship. What I did was I would try questions 1, 2, I'd read question 3 and 4, but I'd actually skip ahead to questions 6 and 7, start to get a handle on them. Those are the mid-range questions. If I ever have, so I'm always worried about running out of time. That's one of the things I'm always worried about. And if I find that I wasn't watching the clock and I got 2 minutes left, which do I have a better chance of doing? Scribbling down some of part of an answer for 6 and getting some part marks, or probably I could just scribble down an answer to question 2 or question 3 really quickly. They're the easier ones. And in some cases, they're just a short answer. Another test-taking strategy, once you're there, a lot of people I know recommend you skip and read the last questions. And by last questions, I don't mean the final questions. I mean whichever questions you deem are the hardest, probably the ones that'll take you the longest. Typically, they're further down in the contest. So if you're writing the full contest, if you're in grade 12 and trying the whole thing, go ahead and read on the Euclid 8, 9, and 10 before you do anything else. Just read them, maybe see if you understand them. And the reason that you would do this, or if you were, say, writing it and you're in grade 10, or maybe you're writing the Galois and you're in grade 7, and you only think you should be getting up to maybe question 2 or 3 on the Galois, or question 6 or 7 on the Euclid, then those are the ones you'd read first. But the reason you should do this is it's sort of the idea that once you've read something, the human brain is pretty good at, for some reason, working in your subconscious, and your brain can actually work out problems after reading through them and not even having you consciously write or try and problem solve. You read questions 9 and 10, go off, do 1, 2, 3, 4. You come back to 9 and 10, and suddenly you understood the concept, whereas when you first read it, maybe you didn't. Or now you think you understand exactly what the answer to B should be, whereas before maybe all you can do is get A. So it's good to get those questions in your mind and your mind sort of thinking about them or trying to make connections while you're working on other stuff. So that's why some people I know recommend you read the last few questions, the hardest questions, first before anything else, before you even put pen to paper. Another good test-taking strategy is, and this is one from a friend of mine, what he does is he sort of goes through and he reads the contest in its entirety, reads every single question. And some people are like, no, don't do that. But you're going to have to read every question at some point. So it's not a waste of time like a lot of people initially think. So you read every question, you sort of get a sense of it. And if it's an easy or obvious question, this will probably happen for like 1, 2, and 3, or questions in Part A on the CIMC or whatever. If it's an easy question, you think, bam, I know the concept, I know exactly what I'm going to do. In fact, maybe I can even do some of this in my head. You put a little star next to it, or a little tick. And questions where you're like, yeah, I understand what's going on there. I'll probably have to do a calculation or two. I'll have to think about it for a second. You put 2 stars or 2 ticks, and so this is now like a sort of second level difficulty problem. And then for questions that are a little harder, that you think, I'm going to have to read this one again, and I'm really going to have to pay attention, and there's going to be some exactness, that's probably going to be a hard proof to write up, those sorts of things, you put 3 stars or 3 little ticks. The ticks are often quicker than stars. And then for the questions you identify where you're like, I have no idea what's going on, I don't think I've ever learned this, these are the sorts of questions that I was having trouble with before, you put 4 stars or 4 ticks next to them. And then what you do is you go back and start at the start of the competition and you do all your 1 tick or 1 star questions first. And then the 2 star, then the 3 star, and then the 4 star. And if you run out of time, well, the questions that you're going to run out of time, that you're not going to have done, will be the ones you didn't get to, which are those 4 star or 4 tick questions. But you didn't understand how to do them anyway, so you haven't lost out on anything. So this strategy isn't as, say, effective for a Waterloo competition where they are typically laid out as easiest to hardest. They actually go in order that way. But for another competition, I'm trying to think of one that comes to mind. Putnam would do it. Actually the Putnam competition would definitely do it, so this might not be particularly helpful. But there are other contests where the people making them have not taken the time to lay out question 1 as one of the easier ones and then gradually make it harder. And so this strategy would help you identify which the hard ones are if it's not apparent that the ones at the start are easy and the ones at the end are hard. Putnam, big university level competition, and basically each question is almost its own self-contained concept, and you might not have even taken the university class. You need to understand one of the questions. So Putnam very much not laid out from easiest to hardest in general. So with that in mind, having had practiced, hopefully in the long term, a lot of copies of your contest, you will be familiar with whereabouts the hard questions probably are, what your difficulties are, and you should make plans. You should sort of have a plan of attack going in terms of budgeting your time. So this can be as simple as, I'm only going to spend 15 minutes on the Part A questions on the Cayley. And I'll spend 20 minutes on, I expect to spend 20 minutes on the Part B, and the remaining, what are we up to? The remaining 25 for questions number 5. It can be as basic as that, or it can be each question should take me no more than 2 minutes. When I hit that 2 minutes, move on to the next one, that sort of thing. But you should be keeping an eye on the clock, and you should be budgeting your time. Don't waste an hour on question number 3 on the Euclid, because maybe it's just a concept you're not getting. Try number 4. Don't be the person who says, I have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's no way I'm moving on to 5 if I haven't done 4, because maybe 4 is just a concept you're not getting, and that's possible. So you have to be able to recognize that. And that leads into another thing I want to say is, if you find you're getting stuck, if you find you're getting frustrated, if you find you're just not understanding a question, skip it. I see a lot of people who, for some reason, have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or say, I need to finish everything in Part A before I move on to Part B. No, you don't. Your goal here is, and this is the same whether or not you're writing a contest or a test or an exam, your goal is to maximize the number of points you're going to get. Okay? There are some contests out there that say, oh, a complete answer is better than some partial answers. But, and if that's the case, then in your long-term planning, you should be aware of that and budget your time based on that as well. But for the most part, there's almost always part marks available, and you want to maximize getting those part marks, and that means maximizing the number of questions that you can at least partially do, and not getting hung up on one question for half your time. Okay? So if you see a problem and it's not clicking, skip it. Or you have said, I'm only going to allow 5 minutes for each question. If you're really not getting it by the 4th minute, say no. I'll go to the next one. Okay? You can always come back and try things later, but you don't want to get stuck for a ridiculous amount of time just on one question that happens to be that's the one question that's going to get you. Okay? Other things to do in terms of strategy. So I said budgeting your time. Understanding the marking. So I already mentioned this, know where the low mark questions are and the high mark questions are. But even within a question. So going back to the Euclid, for example, question number 10 usually has an A part, a B part, and a C part. A is usually worth 1 or 2 marks. So it's usually not that hard. And the harder parts will often be worth more marks. So understand where the marks are roughly proportioned, and this can help you with your time budgeting. A question that's worth 10 marks should probably get a little more time than a question that's worth 1 or 2 marks. Okay, and so it's not always apparent, especially on like the Euclid, that A is worth 1 mark and B is worth 2 marks. I don't even think they say that in the solutions that they post. So sometimes that can be a difficult thing to get a handle on. But just understand that, and this will also come about when you're practicing, but understanding where the marks come from can tell you even how much you should be writing. For doing written solutions on, say, a Galois paper, I would not do as much writing for question number 1, which is meant to be easier, as I would for question number 4, which is meant to be sort of the hard one, where the explanations are needed, even though they are both worth the same amount. What else to do? Do your best to relax, and part of that is when you get frustrated, skip over things. Another good thing that I do, and people get upset about this because they say, oh, you're wasting time. But I find if it's a long competition, like Euclid's 2.5 hours, Putnam is 3 hours, a break, and then 3 hours. If I'm stuck, let your mind wander. I routinely draw cowboys and doodle on the side. Just get your mind off of math for a moment. Don't feel like you have to completely overload yourself with, okay, I didn't get this question, well, I better start doing another question. Because if I'm not doing math all the time, then I'm doing something wrong. No. If for a long-haul contest, take breaks. Think about things other than mathematics. Relax yourself by playing games or something. Like, just play tic-tac-toe against yourself. Anything to just take your mind off it for just a moment. Now, for a contest where you only have an hour or half an hour or something like that, you're right, you will lose some time if you start doing this. But it's sort of like when you study. A good idea for studying is, you study for half an hour, take a 5-minute break. Study for half an hour, take a 5-minute break. Not study straight for 5 hours. Your brain just doesn't retain as much information when you do that. Likewise, on a contest, your brain just doesn't function if you force it to sort of be in math mode for 2 hours straight. You got to take some time. And people will resist. You resist this idea at first, but if you've taken some contests before, you'll see you do sometimes have time to let your mind wander and imagine what shapes the clouds are outside. Who knows? Okay. I think that's about it for very specific things in terms of what to do when you're in the contest. Yeah, I'll talk about different types of solutions in another video, and maybe I'll elaborate on sort of ideas for what to do when you're stuck, but I sort of covered the main ones here. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in another video, be it a contest solution video or another one of these how to contest sort of videos. So thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time.